there was $10 in that frame that were 160 or bigger. You know, that like where he was filming that big deer. So it was like, I got to buy this whole neighborhood somehow. You know, it's like, how do I do this?
This is a clip with Bill Winke on how he bought his first piece of ground, why he ended up selling that position, and also a very funny story with hunting legend Roger Rothhaar in a very interesting bidding war way back in the day. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Let's get right into it. Here we go.
Not starting with nothing, but starting with very little and just finding a way to constantly make things move and get things bought and make deals and like rolling that over to the next piece. There's not a lot of people that have the ambition's the right word to make a lot of that happen.
And I think that, you know, opportunity also, and you know, I think that God also played a role in just saying, okay, you know, I'm going to go along with your dream too here, you know, because too many pieces fell into place. You know?
Sure.
It wasn't, you can call it luck or you can call it whatever, you know, but it was like even the guy that sold me the original 125 acres down there, he said, gosh, if I'd have thought this was possible, I never would have sold it to you, you know,
to what you tied together.
Yeah. It just kept growing and growing. But there were some pieces in the air at, you know, a lot of balls in the air, you know, at one time. And to have them all kind of come back to rest in the right place, you know, when the deals went through was kind of miraculous in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I mean, it started with buying a part ownership of a large corporation, a subchapter S corporation. And we literally had, I think, like $12,000 in the bank. We bought 1/14 ownership in a property that owned like 3,600 acres and leased the neighboring like 400 and some. So it was like 4,000 acres in one block. You know, and we owned, my wife and I, 1/14 interest in that. Well, you'd think that would cost a fortune. I mean, it didn't though back then, because land was in land that wasn't encumbered, you know, by a corporation like that was still in the 300s per acre, $350 an acre. So encumbered real estate like that, you know, people are like, well, it's not like buying those many acres. You're only buying like a part ownership of it. It's not the same. So, you know, you're buying in at roughly $300 an acre, you know, into that, you know, so you take 1/14 of that and, you know, it's not a huge chunk of money, but that got me into the game. It got me into Southern Iowa and, got me started with deer management. That was 1995. I was pretty quickly the president of that corporation because we were actually living on the property, my wife and I, and you know, so I was doing all the deer management, all the land management stuff, and you know, I'd get up at 5 a.m. and go up to my office. I was writing for magazines back then, and I'd work until about noon or 1 o'clock, and then I'd jump on a tractor until dark, you know, and come back and you know, eat and go to bed and then get up and do it again. I mean, just like day after day after day, because there's so much work out there. We had 80 some food plots on that piece, and they weren't all maxed out and in great shape, you know, but even if you keep, you know, 60 of them, it's still a lot
in good
of work.
standard.
Yeah. So that was my introduction to, you know, really the interaction of how deer, you know, behave and how they, you know, how they thrive, what kind of habitat works, you know, what kind of habitat doesn't. You know, how do you create food plots in areas where the deer density is too high, you know, stuff like that, you know, and how do you get the deer density down in areas that are too high? All those dynamics. It was a really good classroom for that stuff. But anyway, that was just I'm sorry I took a long answer on
Was
that.
Was the president position a paid one?
No.
It was okay.
Yeah. No, we stayed in the house for free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we stayed in the house for free. So that was as good as it got. There was no paid anything down that place.
It kind of seems like that start tied in more ways. Obviously, got you in the land game, but beyond that was a gentleman named Jack.
Yeah, that
played in later. Was Larry Kendall part of that corporation?
No,
he was not. Okay.
No, he was just and Larry came into the story a little bit later. You know, my wife is from Michigan, and we'd met right after when I graduated from college, and worked out in Michigan for 4 years. But we thought, well, let's, you know, the kids are, you know, we had one and we were getting ready to have another one, you know. It's like, maybe we need to be closer to grandma, you know. And her dad had already passed away from a heart attack a few years earlier, or, you know, roughly in that time frame. But anyway, we were going to get closer to her family. So we went to Michigan for 3 years, and we still owned that property in Southern Iowa. So that was during that period, you know, of that subchapter S. Then when we came back, you know, it was just too hard for us, you know, for me to travel and find places to hunt and have a young family and stuff. You know, it was more, you know, we decided that it made sense just to get back where I could hunt in my own backyard. So we were going to try to buy something as close to that corporation land as we could find. And there's a big, long story around this, and I'm going to have to skip that story, but it's actually kind of cool how we ended up on the property that we did. I'll tell a really short part of it, but while we still lived in southern Iowa, there was 900 and some acres that I kind of got onto the market. I called the people up, and I thought, I got like $12,000 in the bank, or $10,000. Like, these people own 900 acres, So I called them, and I said, "Hey, would you be interested in selling that 9,000 acres?" And or not 9,000, I'm sorry,
900.
900. Let's go back. Yeah, 9,000. It might as well have been 9,000 for what I could afford. So they're like, "Oh well, maybe." So the next morning, a local realtor calls me and says, "Hey, are you interested in such and such property?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And I said, what did they price it at? Because I knew it would cash flow at $375 per acre. I wouldn't have to put any money in.
Okay.
Because the CRP income on it. So I just thought, well, maybe if I can get it cheap enough, then I can make money on this. I was like, how stupid. I could have bought it. And I just kind of sat there, and waited and saw.
So you were a tire kicker?
Well,
or no?
I wasn't. I was going to buy it.
Okay.
And I had a timber guy come and look at it, and he said, yeah, there's enough money on here to make the down payment. You just have to, borrow the money and get you to that
short-term loan.
point.
Yeah.
Right? I thought, well, I'm just going to let them soften up. Nobody's looking at it. I'd call the realtor every, few weeks and say, hey, anybody interested? No offers, or nobody's looking at it. And so then little by little, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to come back at him, because I offered him like $325 an acre to start, and I thought, well, I'm going to make a little bit of money on this one. So then like 6 months in, then a guy named Roger Rothhaar, and you guys have probably heard Roger from Ohio.
Yep.
Roger was looking for land in southern Iowa, and he jumped in there, and it's like, oh no, the local game warden, who was a friend of mine, told Roger that it was for sale, because the sign was sitting on there, and he didn't know that I was trying to buy it.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, Roger ended up with it, and there was some funny stuff that happened in the process of Roger buying it that I really still chuckle about, but because I'll tell it, it's kind of funny. But the realtor came back to me and said, well, Roger offered this amount, and they're going to take it, but if you'll go $25 an acre more, they'll sell it to you because you were in there first.
Yeah.
And now they're up in the $400 an acre range. I'm like, I can't do that. No, dang. But tell Roger I'm going to, So then, of course, it's like the people are like, oh no, he's going to. So then Roger had to bump his up. So then, even though I wasn't going to, he had to jump above me. So I figured it ended up costing him like another $50,000 or something to buy it. But anyway, the realtor thought that was kind of funny too. But the poor Roger.
Hopefully, you at least got a dinner or something out of that.
No, she sent me like a gift certificate to a restaurant for like $20. So I didn't get it, but Roger only took 700 and some acres of it. He didn't take the full 900. And during that process, that one corner of it that was at 125 plus, I'd taken my wife there, and we drove down this little field lane, and I stopped on this hill overlooking this beautiful valley. And I said, man, this is where we could build a house, if we get this bought. And she said, yeah, it's pretty cool. Then we drove away. We didn't get it bought. I didn't realize Roger didn't buy that 125. Well, we moved to Michigan, do all that we talked about. We moved back again, and Larry Kendall had bought that 125 for nothing, like $200 and some an acre.
Wow.
He put a house there, right in the exact same spot where I said to Pam, this would be a cool spot for a house. Well, Larry was willing to sell it. So we drove down that driveway. I said, you've got to be kidding me. This is the exact spot that I was going to build a house if we could have bought that, original 900 acres. So we bought the house and the 125 from Larry. So that's what got us into that cedar-sided house that, they kind of remember from, through the years. So anyway, that got us back, and that got me into my own, owning my own land. And so by now the land was $1,000 an acre, roughly.
So 95 to what year did it?
So we bought Larry's place in 2002. So we went 95 to 99. We lived in the house on the subchapter S.
Yep.
Then we moved to Michigan for 3 years.
Yep.
Came back in 2002, and that was when we bought Kendall's house and the 125 acres. It kind of became, our center point, for the pieces that I added after that. It's kind of funny how that worked, because I'm sure we wouldn't have built a house as nice as the one that Larry built.
Sure, it worked out.
Yeah. It was kind of like this, great big giant windows, looking down a big valley, and it was really, really nice. I mean, I can't imagine really a better dream property for a whitetail hunter in the Midwest, except maybe if you're up on a bluff or something, but just from the how beautiful that place was. And the house was perfect too, because it was nice, but it wasn't really nice. So if somebody came by, you didn't like stress out if they kept their shoes on and walked through the house, it's like, so it was a perfect place for the kids, to bring their friends over and run around and play, Nerf gun wars and whatever, and so everything about it was, the ideal place for our stage in our life at that point. And I got to driving around the neighborhood, of course, and even that 125 original was pretty good. I mean, it was only 3/4 of a mile from that 3,000 some acre,
so that was a bonus too.
Yeah. So then all I had to do was jump in my car, run around or truck, and run around, and I was hunting on the other property. So now I had the 125 where I could hunt, and I had the big piece, which, they had a landowner tag in Iowa that, if you own land, you could shoot another buck, so now I had a place where I could do that, but I was surprised at how good the 125 was. And I started driving around the neighborhood, paying attention. It's like, wow, there's a lot of really, really big deer out here. I mean, it was better than the 3,000 acre tract. And it's had to do with deer densities and stuff like that.
Deer density was too high on the other one?
Yeah. It was sort of like the center of a target, and then the rings get,
sure,
better as you go out.
Yeah.
And what happens is, if the target has too many deer, then the bucks are going to fringe out into the rings.
Yep.
So my area had a lot of those, really nice bucks that were fringing out. And driving around the neighborhood, I was like, oh man. At one time, I put Larry Zock did it. He had bought some land a little ways down the road too, and the artist Larry Zock, and I saw him parked. And I'm like, no, Larry, be quiet. Don't let people see, because there was a bean field and you could see down this ridge. And there's just huge bucks out in there. And he set his camera on a fence post, and we kind of hunkered down. And before the evening was over, and he had zoomed in on one big non-typical, it was in the 230 range. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And by the time that it got finished up, by the time they'd run, until, the end of daylight, there was 10 bucks in that frame that were 160 or bigger, that like where he was filming that big deer. So it was like, I got to buy this whole neighborhood somehow. It's like, how do I do this? So I talked that guy into selling to me that owned that piece. So that was 275 acres. So now I'm up to 400, and I'm like, okay, I'm maxed out. And I've got like 400 really, really prime acres, and I thought, oh, I'm good, But then I started driving around the neighborhood some more. It's like, boy, there's some really big deer over on this side too, and so little by little, then my other neighbors would come to me and say, hey, we're thinking about selling. And of course, when it's not listed, you don't have any bargaining power. So I was paying a premium for the land.